This podcast is brought to you by Mapper Forward's new Patreon community, the Global Coffee Think Tank. Check the show notes or head to patreon.com/Mapper Forward to find out how you can become a member today. Welcome back to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, friends. We have had a slight background change for those who are watching. It was a sun issue, so this is still all being recorded on the same day, etc., etc. So today, again, we are joined by Madeleine, one of the co-owners of PCR, and we are talking about Coffee Leaf Rust in Hawaii. Now, in today's episode, we are going to talk about what is being done to address coffee leaf rust in Hawaii. And in the next episode, we're going to talk about what actually needs to be done that perhaps isn't being done. So, Madeleine, I know that you're very well connected in with the different associations that are involved in this. So why don't we start by kind of outlining who are the players that are involved in finding a solution for coffee leaf rust, because it is economically devastating for the coffee producing community in Hawaii. So why don't we start by identifying the associations, and then we can talk about what all the different associations and the stakeholders are doing to come up with some solutions.
Awesome. Yeah. So there are many different organizations and agencies that are involved in these conversations right now. One of them is the Hawaii Coffee Association, HCA. Something that I learned, just a side note, is that there are acronyms for everything. So it's like anytime you start getting involved with this stuff, you're just like, okay, what does that stand for? Give me the definition real quick. So HCA, the Hawaii Coffee Association. There is an organization called SHAC, or the Synergistic Hawaii Agriculture Council, which I'm actually a board member of. And my business partner, Britt, is a board member of the HCA. I chair one of the committees of that. There is also the Hawaii Department of Agriculture, which we just call HDOA. There is the Hawaii Agriculture Research Center, also known as HARC. There is the Pacific Basin Agriculture Research Center, also known as PBARC. USDA, which is just the federal level of HDOA, the Maui Coffee Association, the Kona Coffee Farmers Association. What are the other organizations? There's another entity called APHIS, which I think stands for Animal and Plant Health Inspection Services, something like that. And there are probably a couple of others that I am forgetting. And also really local legislators, local representatives and things like that in the legislative are involved in these conversations as well. So lots of folks, lots of different people who are working on this. And with that, I do want to say coffee producers are involved in these conversations too. And so their opinions and thoughts are definitely also playing a role in this whole process as well.
Right. So we've got a whole group of people who have a lot of opinions and a lot of agendas. One would suspect that the agenda is how do we deal with coffee leaf rust, but it goes far beyond just how do we deal with coffee leaf rust. There are economic ramifications, there are political agendas, there are supply chain issues, etc., etc. Everyone's got a different interest in how to handle this situation. There's a lot of bureaucracy that comes with that. So what is actually being done to deal with coffee leaf rust?
Yeah, so right now there are, and what actually happened almost immediately were these multi-agency meetings. And so all of these folks started coming together on a very regular basis. I think in the beginning it was a weekly basis, and now they're down to like every 2 weeks. And just to at least like try to form some sort of plan. And as you kind of alluded to, when you have a lot of voices in there, a lot of different things can be thrown around, and there is not necessarily always a cohesive direction, which can also kind of play into our advantage, because with something like coffee leaf rust, there really is not one solution. You have to come at it at many different angles. And so I was honestly quite impressed to see these groups come together and these conversations happen, and actually have all of these folks in the same quote unquote room. There were all these meetings are done on Zoom, but have all of these conversations, and all of these really intelligent human beings who know how to work within the systems that they are given and the systems that they're familiar with. So what's happening specifically right now is, and one of the biggest things that really happened is there was this huge grant that was awarded to SHAC, which is the Synergistic Hawaii Agriculture Council. And this is a $6 million plus grant that was awarded to them. And it is a 4-year grant that is designed to like basically attack coffee leaf rust and find solutions from different angles. So there are five or six different areas that this grant is being used to kind of work within these systems. One is to find different varietals and hybrids to propagate, and we need to do like testing and all of these different things. So we're working, this grant is working with the university system and the different agricultural research centers to do these variety testings and figuring out what varieties might work to bring to Hawaii and plant here for rust resistance. Then another plan of attack is like field management. So looking at soil health and tracking like what producers are doing, what are they spraying, how frequently are they spraying, and the big goal there is to issue actual concrete maintenance practices and techniques to coffee producers. Then there's also like this economic analysis that is being funded to look at the cost benefit of these two different approaches of farm management and variety planting. So replacing your crop versus just trying to maintain what you have right now and trying to like fight off coffee leaf rust. There's also genomic work that is being done. So what the big questions here were trying to identify what strain of rust did we have, because that's one of the tricky things with coffee leaf rust is there are many different types of coffee leaf rust. And many different
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so different strains will respond to different fungicides positively or negatively, or different plans of attack. You know, it responds differently. So you need to know what species of coffee leaf rust do you have, what kind do you have, and then that informs kind of the next steps. And so this can also advise us in variety replantings, because some hybrids are more resistant to specific strains than they are to others. And so if you end up just recommending a variety based off of yield and cup quality, right, but that one ends up being susceptible to the strain of coffee leaf rust you have, well, you haven't really actually solved anything.
Right.
And then really looking at chemicals and biocontrols. So this is really looking at fungicides and what fungicides are also best for the strain of coffee leaf rust that we have, and how we can use possibly organic fungus type of biocontrols versus these intense chemical fungicides. So this huge grant is providing funding to all of these different sectors and all of these different like plans. And it's a great grant. It's a great plan of attack. Through all of this, people can probably surmise this all takes time, right? It takes time to even have that money released. It took time to have that money released. It took time for us to be able to even like publicize that this grant was awarded to SHAC. And when that happened, then you have to like get all of the contracts in order and make sure everybody is confirmed for all that. So it takes time. But that is one of the huge things that's happening right now in trying to mitigate coffee leaf rust and trying to figure out really what the next steps are. A big thing that happened a couple of months ago is that the strain of rust that we have here was identified. So that's really like the first piece of the puzzle and figuring everything else out. And I know that there is some movement happening with that. The last thing I heard is that like basically all of the contracts are confirmed except for one that they're waiting on in Puerto Rico. And actually this grant is going to be benefiting Hawaii and Puerto Rico for all of this research. And it's actually a split effort amongst agencies in Hawaii and Puerto Rico, which is pretty cool too. So that's a huge thing that's happening. And then on the legislative level, there is a bill that is moving through all of the different levels right now that is asking to classify coffee leaf rust as, or have it listed in the Hawaii Invasive Species Council, which doing that actually opens the possibility to funding, for federal funding to combat invasive species. With that, there are some kind of like administrative hurdles, I guess, that people are like, okay, well, what is the process to actually even get it listed on here? Because apparently that isn't clearly defined, but this bill is in action. So if we're hoping that something positive comes of it, which again would just allow the industry to have access to federal funding to combat invasive species. What is another big thing that's happening right now? So these research centers that I mentioned earlier, PBARC and HARC, they actually do have some coffee plants that are rust-resistant varieties. And they've had them for a while. And now those centers are more intentionally looking at those varieties and doing some quality testing on them and seeing what is possible with them. And this is actually something really cool that we were involved with recently, is that we did a cupping. We did a quality cupping of Katimor coffee that is being grown at one of these research farms. And it was separated out by tree. And so each tree we cupped separately and evaluated for quality. And this was kind of the first step to hopefully find the trees that perform the best for quality, and then hopefully being able to propagate plants specifically from those trees. And at the same time, pairing that with like, well, how well is that tree doing in terms of yield and health in the growing conditions here and all of that stuff. So it's really starting to bring these pieces together. And that cupping was, really awesome to be a part of, I'll say, just from like a personal and professional standpoint. To be in the room, in that room we had myself and my business partner, a coffee producer, an agronomist, and like a woman who works in the lab facility of these research centers. And it was just really cool to have that experience truly, and to also feel like, okay, we're starting to build the next steps of another possible solution, right? So that is something that's happening, and I hope that we have the opportunity to do more of these quality evaluations, like sensory quality evaluations, to see how other varieties that might be planted on these research centers are faring and what we think of them. Is this a viable solution, and are we also like working with a variety that is resistant to this strain of rust that we have too? So again, all of the pieces are kind of slowly falling into place. What is another thing? There were two bills that unfortunately died in the legislative sessions, but there were two bills that were aimed at expanding plant quarantine facilities and building private plant quarantine facilities. So in one of the previous episodes, we talked about how there are hurdles and barriers to bringing plant material and green coffee really into Hawaii. There are extra like hoops to jump through. Mm-hmm. And one of the things specifically with plant material, and when I talk about plant material, I mean seedlings or tissue cultures, there is a required 1-year quarantine for all seedlings before they can be released into Hawaii. And
wow.
These plants are being housed in quarantine facilities that are not ideal for coffee production where they are located. It's not the right climate for them at all. And to be totally honest with you, a lot of the folks who are managing these facilities they're not coffee farmers. Mm-hmm. You know, they don't know how to properly take care of these plants. And so when anybody wants to import coffee seedlings, there is they already know that they're running the risk of losing a significant percentage of the material that they're actually trying to import, because they'll just die because they won't survive the conditions of the quarantine facilities. And so that's a huge thing. And the other thing is that a lot of these facilities don't have the necessary personnel in terms of just like number of people to properly manage the amount of plants that folks will need to be bringing in. And there just like isn't that manpower available. And so it is unfortunate that these two bills died in the legislative session. What I was recently updated on is that they were turned into resolutions, and they passed like the agriculture committee in our legislative, but they're resolutions versus bills, and resolutions are not binding. So even if a resolution passes, you don't actually have to do anything about it. And so it kind of ends up being,
which is cute.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like, well, we're making a statement, but who's actually going to do something about this? And so that's one of the big things I would say is really unfortunate that is not happening right now. So, and I'm curious to know how that evolves and what happens with it. We do fortunately have a lot of like local legislators who want to help find solutions and are trying to do things to help. I think a lot of it for them is a learning curve of understanding what it is that actually needs to happen that is going to be more beneficial. And I mean, when you have politics involved, you have politics involved, right? They're trying to please and appease everybody. They're trying to make sure that everybody is happy with whatever outcome is agreed on. And that can be a little sticky, right? It can be kind of sticky, you know, and it also usually means that things happen more slowly. And
which can be frustrating for producers who are losing their crops and have to stump their trees in real time.
100%. Yeah. I mean, there are producers who immediately reached out to us and they were like, how do we get the rust resistant varieties? And it's like, we don't have an answer for you right now. A source for that does not exist that is publicly available, you know? And so those folks, I mean, we're 18 months into this and those folks are still waiting, you know? They're still like, what am I supposed to do? And we still just don't have an answer for them of like, contact this person or contact this agency. And so it is like a long process, and it's unfortunate that it is becoming a long process. And I do see the way that this is being approached, it it is so systematic, and there are the people who are doing this. Again, we needed to know what is the strain that we have before we can even viably provide some sort of variety solution. And now the next step that they're trying to do is like, what quality are these performing at? And how can we get more of these varieties in here? And because these are hybrid varieties, if they're F1 hybrid varieties, you can't just buy the seeds and plant those and propagate them, because they're going to segregate, and you'll have half of them that aren't resistant and half of them that are. And so if they are F1 hybrids, you need to propagate with tissue culture. So you need a lab to do that, and you need all of the facilities, and you need to make sure that you're actually getting the proper plant material that you're supposed to be getting. So this requires like testing that and having verification on that you're getting the right plant material and not some random hybrid or not hybrid that is not actually the one that you're asking for. And so it becomes this whole big thing that there is no immediate answer for people. And it has become very frustrating for a lot of coffee producers who just feel like there is not a solution for them right now. And what's going to be happening is like, well, how many years of this do I have to endure until I have a solution? And then how many years is it going to take for me to actually have production again after that solution is presented to me? And is the only solution that we're being given right now really to just spray fungicides, when what is that also going to do to my land in the long term? What is that going to do to my neighbors in the long term? And that is really the most immediate solution that is being given, is that, well, you can spray fungicide or you can spray this copper solution. If anybody knows anything about copper, that doesn't go away in your soil. Once you're introducing copper to your soil, it accumulates over time. And copper is seen as like something that can protect the trees from being impacted by coffee leaf rust. But I was reading the like, what is it called? The safety handling sheet of this fungicide that was advised and announced as something that producers can use. And it's just, I mean, it just says like it has such a high, like, fatal impact on water, basically, on like water, you know,
a water source.
Yeah, water sources. And I'm like, we are surrounded by the ocean here. And
Right.
This is the big question. It's like, when storms when any rainfall happens here, all paths lead to the ocean.
It's runoff.
Goes to the ocean here. When we have big storms here, there are brown water advisories put in certain areas of the coastline because of all of the shit that is coming off of the mountains and going into our ocean. And so there are these brown water advisories to not go into this section of the ocean for the next
toxic
time. Yeah. And so when you're thinking about what is being sprayed on farms, how is that ending up in our oceans, not just where we swim, but where we have this amazing ecosystem of
animals
and plants
and wildlife and yeah.
And so it's this huge thing too that people think about. And I was speaking to a coffee producer last week too, who just told me, I don't even want to use it simply because of how long the list of like possible side effects and how long the guide is for how I'm supposed to spray this, and like all of the regulations and rules around it. And there's like a 25-foot barrier that I'm supposed to have between spraying this and like
humans.
And humans. And so it's like, well, what about the person who's supposed to be spraying that then?
Right.
And you have to have a 45-day buffer zone between spraying and harvesting. So you're not allowed to go into your field to harvest for 45 days after you spray this. And so you're just like, how am I supposed to use this on a practical level when it's harvest, if harvest season comes around. So I'm supposed to spray this now a month and a half before harvest season starts, and then I can't use it at all for 5, 6 months, and then I can use it again. But then what am I supposed to do in the interim?
And I'm supposed to feel okay selling this product that has this toxic shit all over it to consumers. I mean, how does any of this work? Any of these solutions, how do they work for organic coffee producers?
They don't, as far as I know. I think that the copper spray is technically accepted for organic certification, but again, when you look at the long-term effects of introducing copper into your soil system, it's not good. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't go away, it just accumulates. So yeah, I mean, that's actually a big question that I have for organic coffee producers right now. Is like, what are you doing? Like, how are you handling this? And the property where we are located, where our facility is located, is an organic farm. And it is not certified organic, but all of the farming methods here are totally organic. And luckily, the coffee producers here, or the farm owners here, are not solely producing coffee. They're not just growing coffee. They have
diversified crops,
and it is all intercropped. There is not just, this is the coffee plot, this is the pineapple plot, this is the papaya and mango. Like, no, it is all across, spread throughout the entire farm. So their ability to control coffee leaf rust is far greater than most coffee producers.
A luxury.
Yeah. I mean, they have at least 6 feet of distance between their coffee trees. And that's if you have them in a row. And then most of their coffee, though, it's like there's some here, and then we got other trees going on, and then we got some other coffee over here, and then we got other trees going on, and there's more.
Sounds amazing. It sounds like an amazing farm.
And it's like it's based off of the model of how we really should be growing things in general versus monocropping.
Yeah.
But so many folks who are just, they're looking at coffee as their product that they produce. So many producers where they inherited this farm, whether it was through a multi-generational pass down or because they bought this farm and this is how it was already planted. And the amount of energy and work and money that goes into like replanting an entire farm
it's prohibitive.
Yeah, it's prohibitive. And so you kind of just do what you can with what you've been given. So it's, yeah, I mean, I don't know how organic farmers who are not, who did not have the gift of having a farm set up in the way that this one is, how they're really handling this. And that is a conversation that I do want to have with some folks, because I'm curious to know how they're faring too and what they're doing. And yeah, because I know people are right now, like I said, they're spraying, they're stumping, or they're trying to figure something else out.
Right. In our next episode, which will be the last one for this series, I want to talk about what's not being done that should be being done to take care of this situation. All right?
Yeah.
Peace, love, and peanut butter, everybody. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks, friends. If you enjoyed this video, here's what you should check out next. Consider supporting Map It Forward on Patreon, and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell before you leave.